The wretchedness of the earth is multiform, overreaching the wide horizon as the rainbow. Its hues are as various as the hues of that arch, as distinct too, yet intimately blended, overreaching the wide horizons as the rainbow. How is it that from beauty I have derived a type of unloveliness, from the covenant of peace a simile of sorrow? But as in ethics evil is a consequence of good, so in fact out of joy is sorrow born. Either the memory of past bliss is the anguish of today, or the agonies of which have their origin in the ecstasies of which might have been. My baptismal name is Aegeus. That of my family I will not mention. Yet there are no towers in the land more time-honored than my gloomy, grey hereditary halls. Our line has been called a race of visionaries, and in many striking particulars, in the character of the family mansion, in the frescoes of the chief saloon, in the tapestries of the dormitories, in the chiseling of some butresses in the armory, but more especially in the gallery of antique paintings, in the library's contents. There is more sufficient evidence to warrant that the belief. The recollections of my earliest years are connected with that chamber, and with its volumes, of which latter I will say no more. Here died my mother. Herein I was born. But it is more idleness to say that I had not lived before, that the soul has no previous existence. You deny it? Let us not argue the matter. I have convinced myself. I seek not to convince. There is, however, a remembrance of remembrance which will not be excluded. A memory like a shadow, vague, variable, indefinite, unsteady, and like a shadow, too, in the impossibility of getting rid of it while the sunlight of my reason shall exist. In that chamber I was born, thus awakening from the long night of what seemed but was not, non-entity, at once into the very regions of fairyland, into a palace of imagination, into the world of dominions of monistic thought and erudition. It is not singular that I gazed around me with startled and ardent eye, that I lured away my boyhood in books, and dissipated my youth in reverie. But it is singular that as years rolled away, and that noon of manhood found me still in the mansion of my fathers. It is wonderful what a stagnation there fell upon the springs of my life. Wonderful how total inversion took place in the character of my commonest thought. The realities of the world affected me as visions, and as visions only, while wild ideas of the land of dreams became, in turn, not the material of my everyday existence. My every deed, existence utterly, solely in itself. Berenice and I were cousins, and we grew up together in my parental halls. But differently we grew. I, ill of health, buried in gloom. She, agile, graceful, and overflowing with energy. Her rambles on the hillside, mine, the studies of the cloister. I, living within my own heart, addicted body, mind, and soul to the most intense and painful meditation. She, roaming carelessly through life, with no thought of the shadows in her path, or the silent fight that rigged winged hours. Berenice! I called on her name. Berenice! And from the grave ruins of memory 1,000 tumultuous recollections are startled at the sound. Vividly is her image before me now, as in the early days of her light-heartedness and joy. Oh, gorgeous, yet fantastic beauty. Sylph amid the shrubberies of Arnheim. Oh, not yet among its fountains, and then all its mystery and terror, and tale which should not be told. Disease, a fatal disease, fell like the simoon upon her frame, and even while I I gazed upon her, the spirit of change swept over her, pervading her mind, her habits, and her character, her person. Alas, the destroyer came and went, and the victim, where is she? I knew her not, or knew her no longer as Berenice. Among the numerous train of melodies superinduced by the fatal and primary one being effected, a revolution of so horrible a kind in the moral and physical being of my cousin may be mentioned as the most distressing and obstinate in itself, in its nature, a species of epilepsy, not frequently terminating the trance itself. Trance, very nearly resembling positive dissolution, from which her manner of recovery was, in most instances, startling abrupt. In the meantime, my own disease, for I have told that I should call it by no other appellation, my own disease then grew rapidly upon me, and assumed finally a monomaniac character of a novel and extraordinary form, hourly and momently gaining vigor, and at length obtaining over me the most incomprehensible irritability of those properties of the mind and metaphysical science termed the attentive. It is more probable than that I am not understood, but I fear indeed that it is no matter possible to convey to the mind of the merely general reader an adequate idea of the nervous intensity of interest with which in my case the powers of meditation, not to speak technically, busied and buried themselves in the contemplation of even the most ordinary objects of the universe. To muse for long, unwearied hours with my attention riveted to the most frivolous device, on the margin or in the typography of a book, to become absorbed for the better part of a summer's day, in a quaint shadow falling aslant upon the tapestry or upon the floor, to lose myself for an entire night watching the steady flame of a lamp or the embers of a fire, to dream away whole days over the perfume of a flower, to repeat monotonously some common word until the sound by that frequent yet repetition ceased to convey any idea for the mind, to lose all sense of motion or physical existence by means of absolute bodily quiescence, long and obstinately preserved, and such were a few of the most common and least pernicious vagaries induced by condition of mental faculties, not indeed altogether unparalleled, but certainly bidding defiance to anything like analysis or explanation. Yet, let me not misapprehend. The undue earnest and morbid attention thus excited by objects in their own nature frivolous must not be confounded in the character with the ruminating prosperity of common to all mankind, and more especially indulged in by persons in ardent imagination. It was not even as prosperity, but primarily essentially distinct and different. In the one instance, the dreamer or enthusiast being interested by an object usually not frivolous, imperceptibly loses sight of this object in the wilderness of deductions and suggestions issuing their form, until at the conclusion of a daydream often replete with luxury, you find the intimentum, or first cause of his musings, entirely vanished and forgotten. In my case, the primary object was invariably frivolous, although assuming through the medium I a distempered vision of retracted and real importance. Few deductions, if any, were made, and those few pretentiously returning upon the original object as the center of the meditations were never pleasurable. At the termination of the reverie, naturally exaggerated interest, which was the prevailing feature of the disease, in a word, The powers of mind more particularly exercised were with me, as I have said before, the attentive, and are with the daydreamer the speculative. My books at this epoch, if they did not actually serve to irritate the disorder, partook, it will be perceived, largely in their imaginative and consequential nature, of the characteristic qualities of the disorder itself. I remember, among others, the treatise of the noble Italian Coelus Secundus Curio, the Empathy, Beauty Regni Dei, St. Austin's great work, The City of God, and De Filius Credible Est Quia Evanetum est Sepultus Resurrexit, Certum est Quia Impossibili est, occupied my undivided time for many weeks of laborious, fruitless investigation. Thus it will appear that from its balance, only by trivial things, might reason bore resemblance to that ocean crag spoken of by Toby Heavenson, which steadily resisting the attacks of human violence, and the fiercer fury of waters and the winds trembled only by the touch of the flower called Espadon. And although the careless thinker, it might appear a matter beyond doubt that the alteration produced by her unhappy melody in the moral contradiction of Berenice would have formed many objects for the exercise of that intense, and yet such was not in any degree in the case. In the lucid intervals of my infirmity, her calamity indeed gave me pain, and taking deeply to the heart the total wreck of her hair and gentle life, I did not fail to ponder frequently and bitterly upon the wonder-working mean by which so strange a revolution had been so suddenly brought to pass. But these reflections partook not in idiosyncrasy of my disease, and were such would have occurred under similar circumstances to the ordinary mass of mankind. True to its own characters, my disorder reveled in the less important, but more startling changes wrought in the physical frame of Berenice, in the singular, most appalling distortion of her personal identity. During the brightest days of her unparalleled beauty, more surely I had never loved her. In the strange anomaly of my existence, feelings for me had never been of the heart, and my passions always were of the mind. Through the gray of the early morning, among the treeless shadows of the forest at a noonday, and in the silence of my library at night, she had flirted my eyes, and had seen her, not as the living, breathing Berenice, but the Berenice of a dream, not as being of the earthly, but as the abstraction of such a being, not as a thing to admire, but to analyze, not as an object of love, but as a theme of the most abstruse, although desultory speculation. And now I shuddered in her presence. I grew pale at her approach, yet barely lamenting her fallen and desolate condition. I called to mind that she had loved me long, and in an evil moment I spoke to her of marriage. And at length the period of our nuptials was approaching, when upon an afternoon in the winter of the year, one of the most unseasonably warm, calm, and misty days, which are the nurse of the beautiful Hagelin, I sat, as I thought, alone in the inner apartment of the library. But uplifting my eyes, I saw that Berenice stood before me. Was it my own excited imagination, or the misty influence of the atmosphere, or the uncertain twilight of the chamber, or the gray draperies which I felt around her figure, that caused it so vacillating and indistinct and outlined? I could not tell. She spoke no word, and I, not for worlds, could have uttered a syllable. An icy chill ran through my frame, a sense of insufferable anxiety oppressed me.